This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about The Last Wave, directed by Peter Weir, directed in 1977. And the tagline from the film, "Hasn't the weather been strange? Could it be a warning?" And that's in all caps, so I should have shouted it, I guess. And the synopsis here from the Letterboxd. White Australian lawyer David Burton agrees with reluctance to defend a group of Aborigines charged with murdering one of their own. He suspects the victim was targeted for violating a tribal taboo, but the defendants deny any tribal association. Burton, plagued by apocalyptic visions of water, slowly realizes danger may come from his own involvement with the Aborigines and their prophecies. So hey, Peter Weir, the big Australian dog, returns.
I wonder what they do in Australia when they make movies.
What they do, all sorts of things. They go to the desert, go to the outback.
That wasn't Peter Weir though. Is Nick Rogue Australian?
I don't know.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, we're back with Peter Weir, our bud, our friend who made one of, I think, both of our lowest movies in the Creep so far. Maybe not both. It's definitely in the bottom of mine.
Yeah.
But hey, Peter Weir's made better movies.
Well,
Walkabout's
I know it's Nick Rogue. I know, but I think that one's lower than Picnic at Hanging Rock, which I would describe as a disappointment. But Peter Weir also directs some all-time classics and a lot of middling fare that people go, "Oh yeah, he directed that too." But let's not talk about that, like Green Card, and I don't know, Witness ain't so great either.
I'm more on his side than not, but yeah, he's got some stinkers.
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
Let's talk about The Last Wave here. So this is a second time watch for me. First time I watched this was only about 6 years ago, too. So one thing, RJ, that I just realized today while preparing for this episode, and I actually think has been a missed opportunity on this podcast, is commenting on the covers of the DVDs of the films that we're covering. So I think one of the things that I think why maybe this has struck me now is when this movie came out on DVD back in 2002 or something like that. This is at the height when I started buying movies. I was going to stores and I'd see these movies like The Last Wave, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, I know who Peter Weir is. He directed The Truman Show. I love that movie. And then you look at this and you go, oh, I don't know. If I must spend like $42.99 on something totally blind, that's a lot of money. But the one thing that Criterion kind of, I don't know, I think what brings people's attention to Criterion is the design of their covers. And I was thinking about what do these covers say about this movie? So I think maybe beginning here, we'll kind of talk about that. I don't know if you've actually looked at the DVD cover for this or not.
Is it different from the Letterboxd poster?
Yes, that is the theatrical version, which is that bluey purple cover with the wave and Richard Chamberlain's head. With
the quote, I just want to read this real quick. An eerie chiller to tingle your scalp and titillate your mind.
I believe the U.S. title...
Heavy stuff.
The U.S. title for this film is Black Rain.
Why?
Yeah. Because it wasn't going to get distributed, and then they got picked up years later, and it's like, let's give it a real cool title, like Black Rain.
We're going to make it hot.
Something like that, yeah. But anyway, pull up that cover. So, you just type in Last Wave Criterion.
Yeah, I'm on it.
You're good. Beauty. Yeah, so with me, I'm looking at this cover, and it's like, hey, this is a mysterious cover. It's a man facing off against an unseen force. For some reason, it's got sort of this goldy, kind of bronzy look to it, desaturated. What's this all about? And I think that seems accurate to the viewing experience.
Do you also have access to the back of the cover?
Not on my desk, but I do in my room.
If you Google it, you can see it. It is our leading Aborigine man in The Vision, where he's holding the stone. That's a pretty cool back cover, man.
Yeah.
The text is placed to wrap around the important images, and I'm a big fan of that, Jared. They took a little extra care to make it so it looked nice, and they didn't just break down a bunch of text right over a good picture.
Yeah, one of the saddest things about kind of paying attention to things like design is nowadays when you look at modern DVD Blu-rays for the people who still buy this shit,
Yeah.
it's soul crushing seeing the design elements that they like, just like every decision now. I think for me, the all-time iconic bad DVD cover was The Truth About Charlie, the American remake of Charade with Marky Mark. That cover to me is like everything I hate about design and
So
and
with like the
it-
Eiffel Tower
yeah,
and blue light coming out, and is his head photoshopped
Yeah,
onto that turtleneck sweater?
Probably.
What is that?
Probably because that's what everything looks like now, and it's in fact
Bizarre.
that cover is actually probably great now compared to what's come since. But that was like for me
See-
like a real demarcation of like the fall of like graphic design in like movie posters when selling things.
But
And-
Jared, it's from the director of The Silence of the Lambs. That's 2 connections to the Criterion Collection.
Yeah, well, and Jonathan Demme's dead now, so
Well, maybe he had it coming with for that poster.
yeah, I'm sure he had a lot to do with it. But now you go. So the other week, this is like has nothing to do with the Last Wave. I went to Best Buy, and I hadn't been for like months and months because I just stopped going because anything I want to buy, it's like boutique titles from like these studios like Vinegar Syndrome and like Criterion, and none of that stuff shows up in Best Buy in Canada. So I just kind of stopped going, and anything remotely mainstream, I would just order on Amazon. I went to Best Buy to look at TVs, and they just don't sell physical media at all anymore. It's just gone. DVDs, Blu-rays, TV sets, all just are like they have like tiny little shelf
At Best
now.
Buy?
At Best Buy, it's just empty. They have like an area for video games and stuff like that still, but man, that was sad. That really
Better
hurt
go
me.
to Amazon.
Pretty much. It's more niche than ever, physical media.
Mhm.
Anyways, so here, this film, I feel like it succeeds where Picnic at Hanging Rock fails for me. It is it's an Australian film dealing with the relationship of white colonists and Australia as this kind of like weird, mysterious place with this history that predates itself. And it does everything more succinctly, which seems like a weird way to describe Last Wave because I'm sure a lot of people would not describe this as a succinct film. But yeah, this movie, first time I watched this, I like loved this movie. This movie hit me in all the right ways. It's just like it didn't feel like a lot of other films. The visuals and the poetry of some of the visuals and stuff like that, scenery,
fancy.
the creation of atmosphere, like genuine atmosphere, not in the way that sometimes people kind of say, "Oh, it's really atmospheric." Like, I mean, this movie like is full on creating that like constantly, and it's like you have these like really great visuals, especially when it comes to the use of water. Which I mean, duh. It's throughout this movie. There's like the one that like starts things off. Like so, it's like it opens up with that rural setting. Out in the country with like Aborigine people like living on basically like kind of like reserve kind of land almost like out in the middle of nowhere, and then you get like kind of the white kids running around. You get the big storm at the school, and you just have like stuff where like hailstones just are flying through windows with terrified goats. And then it transitions to the city, and you're still getting freaky weather, and this like downpour of water. And there's this one scene where a guy with an umbrella is like at a water fountain drinking water as it just is pouring rain, and it's just like it's such an absurd shot that I'm like, man, it's like so obvious, and like I never get anything like that out of any contemporary movie or anything I watch where you're just like, that's so weird, like what a great little moment that is. And then you get later on and you get 2 shots of this whenever we're at David Burton's house, where like outside of his house you have this pouring rain and you have this shot of this like faucet, like an outdoor tap, and it's like it looks like it's running, but there's just so much water running off of it that it's just pouring out, and it's just like this crazy image of like water, and it's just like it's unnecessary because it's like natural, but we've had to create these things to like irrigate it to make it habitable by people. And it's like it sums up this movie really, really well. And so this movie is just filled with stuff like that, like just packed with imagery like this. As far as the story goes, I mean, it's pretty well exactly what the synopsis says. David Burton here, played by Richard Chamberlain. He's a corporate taxation lawyer who gets tapped to handle a 4-man homicide trial. And it's kind of like it's purposefully contrived because that's
Yeah.
kind of how the story has to go because of the prophecy, I guess, of it. If you like, kind of or fall into like the mysticism of this film,
Mm-hmm.
and it just kind of goes along with this whole direction of him figuring out why he's having these dreams. What's his relationship with Chris Lee, played by David
Christopher
Gopili?
Lee.
Just Chris, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Who we last saw in Walkabout.
He was in Walkabout. I
Oh.
thought he looked familiar, and I was like, why does he look familiar? I'm not going to look into it. I don't want to be a weird dude,
Yeah.
if you follow.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the story just follows like it's kind of it never feels like a courtroom drama, even though there's
Mhm.
like and there's only one real scene of like powdered wigs and stuff like that, and
Sorry, that shit is so lame. I think it's so stupid. Those powdered courtroom wigs. I understand the prestige and the heritage and all that nice history to those things, but it's like, did anyone ever like look at what it looked like when you were wearing those things? Because I feel like if you did, you would maybe be more on the side where you're just like, you know what? Let's just kind of be normal. Let's not wear wigs when we go into the courtroom, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I keep going, but yeah, courtroom wigs are super lame.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a random comment, but it's like, so this movie, I'll throw out there, this really reminded me a lot of Blade Runner.
Okay.
And I don't know something about those urban scenes, like the way they're shot with the congested traffic and stuff like that, and the rain, because that's also a movie that's very rainy. But this movie actually shot a lot during or at least those shots are shot in the middle of the day, which is also why it's kind of off-putting. Anyway, yeah, so there's visuals of the water. There's also the amazing shot of people floating in water. That we'll probably talk about more. That's like super, like kind of like, wow, that's like a
Yeah, I like that.
That's pretty good. And then it just kind of builds. There's this whole element of the film that like I found always strange. This refusal of like so many of the characters that there's like no such thing as like tribal Aborigines in the city. And I don't know. I'm not Australian. I don't get why that wouldn't be possible. Maybe like in 1977 this was like kind of more of a thing, but now it's like, in the world of like there's so much urban fantasy stories that this seems like, well, yeah, of course that's possible. Like why are we ruling it out? So that's always been that's an odd thing watching this movie through again, where it's like, well, I can't believe that, but it's just like, okay, dumb white people, I guess, right? But yeah, I don't know if I love this movie as much as I did the first time I watched it a few years ago. Like I think it was like really up my alley because I was thinking about this sort of stuff more at the time. But I still like really like this movie. It's Peter Weir doing a lot of what he's best at, which is like always been kind of the atmosphere stuff that people talk about. I think the story in this is far more engaging than Picnic at Hanging Rock, mostly because it's not plagued by that second half drag of the thing. But yeah, last week, the end of this movie I think is really awesome. It's just like packed full of strangeness, and it's super memorable. And it's like the one thing I think about whenever I think about this movie is that final shot. And this movie is just packed with great imagery, and it's like, I don't know, most movies can't say they have anything like that. So yeah. Hey RJ, what did you think of The Last Wave?
I'm curious as to what you think I thought of The Last Wave, because we haven't talked about this at all, so you have no idea what my takeaway was.
I think that you would like this film.
Why do you say that?
Why do I say that?
Yeah, elaborate for me.
I don't know.
You can do the David Lynch. You can just say no if you want.
Bullshit.
Yeah, believe it or not, primary colors are bullshit. Elaborate on that.
Yeah.
No. I like this movie.
Yeah.
I do. It's got a lot of stuff that I think is really cool. And I'll explain that. I don't love this movie, but I do like a lot of what this movie achieves and a lot of what it's trying to. I think there's a few things that I would have liked better if they had done it. But, I mean, who am I to say? I don't make movies in Australia, so whatever. But I'm going to tell you about them anyways. My biggest thing when I was watching this, it really reminded me of Take Shelter, and not just because of like apocalyptic visions, but it was more about when you're following this main character who is kind of going down this one path, and there's people who kind of aren't really along with him. And I was like, "Ooh, shit!" I was like, "I like that." I wish I would have had time to watch Take Shelter again and see if it actually lined up or if that was just my memory playing tricks on me. But we'll never know. So, anyways,
there's actually another Peter Weir movie, Mosquito Coast.
Okay.
And it's actually like very Take Shelter-ish with Harrison Ford. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Makes sense.
You mentioned that.
Well, maybe what's his nuts who did Take Shelter, the guy who did Mud and stuff. Maybe he is a big Peter Weir fan. Wouldn't be crazy.
Probably.
But yeah, no. I like The Last Wave. I for a lot of the same reasons that like you brought up, that atmosphere, that creeping dread, that stuff I think is done so well. Where there's really subtle, like really nice subtle shots in this movie, where he doesn't cut away too fast. He doesn't linger on for too long, but it's an appropriate amount of time. And that might sound weird, but I feel like so often, especially in new movies, they'll cut away too fast or they'll stay way too long. And it's like, you don't need to do either of those things. There is a right amount of time. And I think this movie really nails that. So when you were talking about the intro with like all the connections to water, the one that I really liked is when boyfriend comes home and he's eating dinner with his family, which is another scene that I actually really like. Like when they present that scene and the parents are both cutting the dinner for the kids. For some reason, I don't know why, I was like, I really like that. I was like, I like the look of that. It seems authentic. It seems like a real parent thing to be doing. But when they're eating dinner and the bathtub overflows and then they go up to like see what's going on, and the dad puts his hand in to kind of clear the drain, and then the water is draining down through, or the water is like coming down through the drain and it's making that spiral as it drains, and his hand is just kind of there and he's feeling the water drain through the tub. I think that's, for me, that was the most effective scene of that, where they're highlighting the connection between the water, and it's the perfect amount of time.
And then RJ, he winds up going into the sewage.
He goes into the drain, yeah. So I think that scene, that's my favorite scene. It's like 5 seconds long or something, but I feel like new movies would show that for a second and then jump away, or they would show it for way too long, for like 12 seconds, and you'd be like, all right, I get it. But it's right in the middle. It's like 5 seconds and the point gets across. So I really like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of contemporary film take a lot of the wrong lessons from Peter Weir and Terrence Malick because they like, let's extend it longer so people really get it. And it's just like, oh, because it's like more contemplative that way. And it's just like, nope, there's a right amount of time. And learn to edit, you motherfucker.
Well, Terrence Malick had this 10-minute shot. That's pretty good. We could probably do 14. It's like, all right, sure, whatever. No, yeah, I think they do a really good job at letting it breathe. I think is a thing people say about stuff sometimes. You know, you really let it breathe. You unpack it a little bit, but it's not too much. Going back while we're on the water thing, when you brought up the guy who's drinking water out of the water fountain, that is the nastiest ass water fountain I've ever seen, because the water shoots straight up. So to drink out of that, you have to like go over it, but your mouth is going to be like sloshing down onto the water fountain, and all your dirty ass mouth is going to get in that thing. I'm talking about it, Jarrett. I know you don't care about germs, but I can promise you there's someone out there listening to this podcast that has the same phobias of germs that I do. And when they watch this movie, they're going to be like, ugh. It's like you might as well put your whole mouth like right on the fucking water fountain. It's like, you never watched Parks and Rec, but some people will know they have a water fountain problem where everyone in their town puts their entire mouths over the water fountain. And that's what I was thinking about with this. And it's just like, ugh. So I hate that shit. But I like this movie. So I really like the understated the understated filming. It's nice. It takes its time getting there, but it establishes this atmosphere and this mood in a really effective way. Um, I think that Chud Christopher Reeves is pretty good as the lead. When I was watching this, I was like, I feel like they wanted Christopher Reeves, but he's not Australian. So they got this guy who's like,
and neither is Richard Chamberlain.
oh, well, you could have fooled me. But I feel like they did want Christopher Reeves, and it was like, well, we can't get him. We'll just get some guy who's kind of like him, but not totally like him. What else did I like about this movie? I like some of the dialogue in this thing. I think it's really good. Where when a dude comes to the dinner house and he's like, "Oh, this is Charlie," and because he brings a guest to the dinner party he was invited to, and they're like, "Oh, is Charlie a relative?" And he's like, "Oh no, he's a painter." I don't know why. I thought that was really funny. I was like, that's sharp. Some dry humor right there. And then there's another thing that I really like when they're talking about the dream world, and the guy's like talking about past lives and walking between like dreams and reality. And he says that one guy is from another sunrise. I don't know why, but I thought that was really beautiful, Jared. It really spoke to me in a sweet way. I was like, oh, what a sweet little moment in this movie. It's like you're from another sunrise, because there was a lot of talk of sunrise and sunset for like the tribal connections and stuff like that. But
yeah, there's the whole thing of like the whole Dreamtime thing. That's like kind of a thing that I think a lot of European writers in particular, they really are into that idea. I mean, I've been attracted to it too, because it's just like this weird idea of that, like when people read about some of the things, like when some of that information, that secret information comes about, when you find out about like death bones and the fact that like Aborigines like talking about, oh yeah, no, I've been to the moon. We went there like 50,000 years ago, and like you're like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, like that's their science, is like dream.
Can you elaborate?
That's literally what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like this is like,
yeah, I know.
Yeah. So yeah, there's sort of like a poetry in this worldview that I think is what's so appealing about it, and that's what when you have Peter Weir making movies like this, and he talks about like I was watching one of the special features of this, and he was talking about his like watching this movie now. He's kind of like, oh man, I don't know if I should have made this movie, and like it was really important that the actor who plays Charlie, he's like kind of like this like elder in the community, and getting him involved in signing off on this story and representing it was really important to him, and he did. He went. They were fine with it and stuff like that. But as we'll talk about later on about people's bones to pick with this film, there'll be some people who are just like, that's just not good enough.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't know that they went through the appropriate channels for that, but because we live in North America and in Canada, in Alberta, when I was watching this movie, I felt a pretty heavy connection to Indigenous people from our area and the way that they're treated and the way that their culture is kind of interpreted and perceived, like to the way that it is in The Last Wave. I thought a lot of it was really familiar to me, where it's like you're watching it and you're like, man, that's in Australia.
Oh boy,
this is how they treat their like the
RJ. You got to watch yourself some Rabbit Proof Fence, and
I'll watch.
You gotta get woke, brother. You gotta get to the treatment of Indigenous people all across the world during the days of colonizing.
I am aware.
It's real nasty bit of work.
Yeah. I think I know what's going on, or I know what happened for the most of it. But no, it's funny watching it, and there's so much stuff where we're like, that's what we do here.
Yep.
Like all the way across, like completely across the world. It's like it's the same stuff.
We're all in the Commonwealth, and I mean America's not, but fuck, you could argue who's treated Indigenous people worse. It's a real race to the bottom there. One of the big moments for me was reading "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee" like 2 years ago. Boy, that book made me fucking mad. Like it's just amazing just how awful the governments have been. Like any government, like I mean, and in the country, like being raised in Canada, you don't really you don't hear about it too much in the school system.
You don't, but in my my current endeavors learning about these things,
yeah,
it is getting very, very heavy attention.
Yes.
Where it's that truth and reconciliation is like one of the like pillars of education that they're trying to put throughout all of Canada, where it's like, hey, you know what? We should probably teach kids that until about like 15 years ago, we were still like carting off Indigenous people in cattle trucks, making like forcing them to do whatever we said, and then like putting them through like these like unbelievably horrible things. And it's like, yeah, they should probably know that, like, that's what happened.
Sure that when I was going to school, I'm pretty sure the kids I was going to school with were like the first generation of like kids that were not going to residential schools. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And they were being raised by people who had their entire culture and life taken away from them. Because cultural genocide is fun.
Well, it makes waves, Jarrett. Yeah. It makes waves.
Last waves.
Oh, I don't want to get too far off topic. If anyone's interested, you can contact us. But we
have a lot of listeners from colonies too.
Yeah, lots of them. We can see how their colonies treated their indigenous people.
Really great.
Really great. But yeah, it's about reconciliation, Jarrett. So I thought it was while watching it, I was making those connections to myself. But I liked what you were talking about when you were talking about kind of denial of tradition, where they're talking about the tribal people. And it's like, oh, there's no tribal people in this city. And it is weird. It's like, what do you mean? But it must be something specific to the culture. And you're like, all right, well, I never like questioned it. It never put me out of it.
No.
I did think it was weird. I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, that must be some kind of Australian thing. But the whole time watching with all that, I was like, oh, man, pretty heavy connections to our real world. And then I kind of like, not in a bad way. I just kind of thought it was funny, some of the ways that they presented their Aborigine people. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I was like, that must just be, again, an Australian thing, where like there's scenes where our lead white man, who is in like a suit and tie walking around.
Big Dave.
And then you have Big Dave. And then you have our lead Aborigine man, and he's like shirtless with a cowboy hat, and they're just walking around downtown, and he's got like a leather coat. And I was like, oh, it's so urban cowboy chic, like homeless man, like no shirt, cowboy hat walking around. We get that here sometimes. They're not as attractive as or fit as the Aborigine
as
man.
Chris?
Not as crisp, but I do like their presentation of him as like shirtless Aboriginal horseman of the apocalypse. I like that. I dig that a lot, Jarrett. What else did I like? Like the foreboding ambiguity. Jesus, the foreboding ambiguity. Can you tell that like my days are longer now when we podcast because
I can't tell the difference.
You can't tell? No. Good. The foreboding ambiguity of things that are like imposing on them. That's the kind of stuff that I really like. I love the dream world. I love the way that they kind of show it. So the only thing about this movie, Jarrett, that I kind of like only like soft criticisms is that I want more of what they're doing, where it's like, yeah, maybe if they did more, it would be too much. And I don't want like them to explain stuff more. Like I don't need any of that. But when they start to get into it, it's like they're kind of going, and then they're there. That's how it kind of felt with me. And I was like, I would like a little bit more. Flesh it out a little bit more for me. I want to see this dream world with the white man and the Aborigine man staring at each other with like no score. And they're just like staring at each other. They're just looking at rocks. And I'm like, yeah, this is some Clive Barker shit right here with all these tribal.
You want Lasagna Cat?
Ooh, I do like Lasagna
You
Cat.
want
The one that I saw.
telephone sex survey.
The one that I saw. Hey, do you know that's my most popular review on
I'm
Letterboxd?
aware.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that.
That's what you want. You want that last 15 minutes of that as the
Yeah,
last wave, though.
true, true. So, no, yeah, I think The Last Wave is pretty cool, pretty good. I don't love it, but I do like it. I think it's a good show. I like it. You know what I mean?
Nope.
That's fine. You never know what I mean. Is it because I don't make sense, or is it because I say things like ambiguity?
Um, yeah. Have another drink there.
This is water.
Sure.
It's carbonated, if that helps.
Fine. Yeah. I don't know. I think the movie
Good
gives
show.
you as much information as
As you need.
needs to do. Because if you go
Mhm.
above and beyond that, then you wind up making a fantasy film. And I
What
don't
do you
know if, well, it's just like I don't know, like when you're talking about like more scenes in the dream time or whatever. I'm kind of like but they don't want to do that though. They want to keep their
Yeah.
they don't want to play into that too much because I don't think even the filmmakers know
Mhm.
what the story is that they're making. They're telling like an incomplete story, kind of intentionally. Would be my
That's
my vibe of it, and like and it adds again to the mystery. It's kind of like an unsolvable thing, and then like when you're mentioning earlier like the way that the water spout in the water is kind of draining down and his hands floating above it, and I went, oh yeah, because this story winds up in the sewer in this like secret like ceremony like cave, which it's just like kind of like it keeps building, and none of it really is going to make sense. It's just kind of it's an unsolvable story, and then I mean then you get to the final shot of David Burton making his like final journey out of the like this trap that he's in. He has to emerge out of shit, out of human feces covered in crap. And he walks out onto a beach and you see some people surfing. And I'm like, oh, these people are surfing like a mere, like probably 100 feet from just raw sewage emptying out into the ocean. And then.
Which shit scene do you prefer, this one or Shawshank Redemption?
Well, he gets to have a rain shower after he emerges, and then but he doesn't get an apocalyptic vision, or does he see, or does he get the real deal? Does he get the big one, the last wave?
Yeah, I feel you. Anyways, yeah, I know. I think that for me, I would like some of that stuff. But it's like I said, I think it's a really fine line where you'd get to. It's like when we talk about horror all the time in the preambles. It's like some horror movies just don't know what to do, and then they do too much of the stuff that they shouldn't. And I feel like the dream world would be very easy to do that. But I don't know. I like the dream world. I like living in the dream world.
I feel like it's pretty consistent. I feel it's a good use of it because it's very restrained. And I feel like what you're asking would come along later after this movie was made, I think. Because I think like other movies would do this now. And I think like for taking this film on its terms, being made in 1977 and what it was going for, I think it's like exactly the scale that you would expect for it at the time. That's how I'm thinking about this one. Like now it's like if this movie was made, like there's actually a movie that I kind of put into the same ballpark as this movie. It's called The Shout, and it's this completely underseen movie just because, at least like in Region 1 land, because it is on DVD in the UK. It's a British film, and it's about kind of like dark magicians and sound artists and like weird kind of sense of spells, but it's so stripped down and so minimal. And I loved, like I watched this movie and I was like, holy crap, this movie's incredible. And no one knows about it. I watched it on my laptop with headphones and like, which was like a total coincidence fluke because it worked out. Watching this movie about sound recording, watching it with headphones was a really good idea. And I have a copy of it on DVD, but it's Region B or whatever, so you can't even lend it out to friends. So that's always a kick in the pants.
A kick where?
A kick in those pants.
Oh.
So this film kind of like for me kind of resembles like this sort of a network of movies of like dark sorcerers and like applying them to like kind of the real world in this kind of minimal sense. Like it doesn't go overboard. Films like Dust Devil, parts of Lord of Illusions, like the good part, the first like 10, 15 minutes, which I think kind of delves closer to maybe what you're suggesting, which is like cool, but it's kind of before that type of movie was being made.
I gotcha.
And then there's like stuff like there's another movie, even like Curse of the Demon. Just like that idea of like, or one of my favorite pulp movies, Devil Rides Out, where you're trying to be restrained. Like that movie's like kind of more like it's a hammer horror kind of thing, and this film is like the art house version of those stories, where it's kind of like it's Peter Weir making it. Like he's not going to make that like kind of fantasy movie. He's going to make something that's like kind of gripped in like reality, and there's like, oh, this guy could just be hallucinating, and it's like none of it's real, and it's very much has its foot in that. It's not trying to go outside of that, but it's like going to still populate it with that Dreamtime stuff that is really appealing, that I think a lot of people respond well to, but not go too far into it.
Yeah, I feel it, dude.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say like some of the stuff that you brought up when I was starting this thing a couple months ago. We did this thing where we were talking to some university professors, and they were getting it. He was like a language guy, and he like a literacy dude, and he was asking us what like our favorite stories were. We had to like fill out this sheet. I was talking about like Stephen King and Ray Bradbury and stuff, and he was like, "I think you would like this book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell." And when you were talking just now, that's what it sounded like was this book. I haven't read it yet, but it's all about like England during the Napoleonic Wars, about like magicians and stuff, and it sounds super like Neil Gaiman-y.
Yeah, I'm actually really surprised you haven't read that book yet, because that was a big deal book. 'Cause that won the Hugo and the Nebula best book of the year awards. Like it's like one of those like one of 7 books or whatever that won both of those. And
well, I don't have the internet, so I can't see what these Hugo things are.
I guess that came out when you were
like baby
in high school. It was when
did it come out?
2005. I'll just throw out there around there.
Yeah, I would have been in high school.
Chanel read that way back when. I remember reading it. I remember like she was okay on it. It's very Vertigo-ish, if that makes sense. If you're familiar with Vertigo comics, like when you said Neil Gaiman, it's like a whole thing. Like Mike Carey, these guys all try to do this sort of like again, urban fantasy is the word that comes to it, but there's a fine line of doing it well. There's like that where there's like True Blood, which when they do it, it comes off as camp, and this is anything but campy.
Well, the best the best way that I like that is Clive Barker, I think, does that so well. Like with his books, like that urban fantasy, like Imagica hits those notes all the time, where it's just like dirty, shitty England. And then it's like, hey, here's some magic and like weird aliens and also some orbs. Check it out. Orbs. Anyways, when you were talking there, it just reminded me of that thing. And I was like, well, why not bring it up?
Why not bring it up? Well, you should.
But we're talking about The Last Wave.
Yeah, well, you should read that book.
I'll try
and see how it is. I think you will like that. I think it seems up your alley, which is why Buddy suggested it. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, hey RJ, there's people who dislike this film.
I imagined there would be.
Yeah. So who hates The Last Wave? Chronic, 1.5 star. Part of my Criterion Collection Films on Netflix list. It is not well acted, especially by the Aborigines. The mystery is only interesting in the beginning, then it lost me.
Wow. Especially the Aborigines. It's weird that he's talking about like acting, but one of his 5-star movies is 8 Mile. It's just like, what are you talking about, dude? What are you talking about? He's got like movies like Leon and Enter the Void. Die Hard 5 stars. That's super original. Lots of standard fare. Fight Club, City of God, all of the original Star Wars. Drive, your favorite movie.
Pumpy, 1.5 star. I was pretty impressed that the climactic apocalypse was loud and bassy enough that you could hear the speakers vibrating behind the forum screen, but otherwise, this movie tries to get by on atmosphere or trumping plot, but the atmosphere is mostly just racist cliches, as is the plot for that matter. The stereotypes on display here are much, much creepier than the horror movie trappings.
I think Pumpy maybe missed the point of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, Peter Weir kind of seemed like apprehensive about this film.
Yeah.
Like he felt it weird watching it because he felt like it was made by a different type of director than he is now. Or I guess when he recorded this interview, like God, now 16 years ago. But like I don't know. I didn't think it was too problematic or anything like that. I think it's like yeah, I don't know.
The way I saw it, it was just like, this is what people are really like. Maybe show some awareness of it.
Yeah.
Where I know, like, even that too, I keep saying it, but it's like, that's that sticky area, that fine line where it's like, what is showing things and what is too much. But I don't know, the way I saw it, it was just like, this is what it's like. Maybe people should see.
Maybe.
Pumpy, though, has some not a lot of 5-star movies, only like 20. And it's pretty regular stuff. But Lemonade, that Beyonce music video album, is in there. So that's going to tell you all you need to know.
No. Gabe Leibowitz, 1.5 star. Atmospheric, to be sure, but it's empty atmosphere. The story feels flat and lacks energy. Though on the surface, the visuals and music resemble Picnic at Hanging Rock, The Last Wave has none of the same haunting vibe or poetic emotional landscape. The story itself is moderately interesting, but more so in theory than in execution. I suppose some people will find the numbing repetition of shots to be stimulating in a hypnotic sort of way, but I can't imagine ever being one of them.
Oh, so pithy, so funny. This person is a major chud. A lot of their worst half-star movies are movies that are legitimately good movies. Like Ace Ventura 2, When Nature Calls.
Come on.
Which is one of my favorite movies. Your favorite movie, Joe's Apartment. Blade 2. Yeah, that's right, Blade 2. My Giant with Billy Crystal. But here's their favorite movies. Come and See, that Russian movie. I feel like that's planted. Something called Margaret. Something called Make Way for Tomorrow. But here's the kicker. One of their favorite movies is Call Me By Your Name, which I've mentioned before. You can go check out my review. That movie is very bad. They got a lot of criterions. They got a lot of 5-star things like Woody Allen, Before Sunrise, Playtime, Rushmore. It's just all criterion stuff. That's it. So I feel like those are almost every 5-star movie is a criterion. So I feel like they know that criterion movies, and then they're like, oh, that's a 5-star movie right there.
Except for The Last Wave.
Well, except for The Last Wave. Yeah. Everything else in their 5 stars, they're all criterions.
What's wrong with a film that has like good atmosphere or nice, or if it was an empty atmospheric film, does that make it a bad film?
Hey Jared, did you think that Nights at Cabiria had atmosphere?
That is not the word that springs to mind to describe that film.
What about Fritz Lang's M?
Sure.
What about Rear Window?
Maybe. It's been a really long time since I've seen it.
What about In the Mood for Love?
I'll rediscover that film in a couple months.
Okay, well, there's a lot of these movies here where it's all criterion stuff, and it's like,
Is Night of the Hunter atmospheric, RJ?
No, that movie's bad.
Oh man, one day
that movie's bad.
One day we're gonna tackle that bad boy, and the world's gonna find out. RJ, it's gonna find out about that movie.
I hope people realize
they're all wrong. You're all
they're
wrong.
All wrong, and you and me can shit all over that thing. And for one time, you will also
that'll be a good day
on a popular movie.
That'll be a good day.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, The Last Wave.
Yeah, that's the movie we're talking about tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie is just like it checks a lot of boxes. We kind of tapped into that that kind of weird mystery, kind of dark fantasy, but not quite. Built-in mystery. Peter Weir doing that thing he does, that atmosphere, checks all those boxes. I like it.
Oh yeah, movies, Last Wave, and yeah, boxes. Check them.
Done. After the break, I've got a bone to pick with RJ. A bone that will kill him.
Ew, Jarrett.